Hi, everybody. So thank you for joining us today for the second day of Hello Tomorrow. Today we're going to address a topic that's quite critical because we live in a world where we're producing 2 billion tons of waste yearly. And the business model we're having of take, make, and dispose is not sustainable anymore. So as we're starting to approach a transition to a circular bioeconomy, we are seeing first steps being taken. We had the 2020 Green Deal. We had first commercializations. But there's much more that remains to be done. And today in the panel, we will explore what next steps should be taken, how do we scale those technologies, and how do we keep them competitive. We have a great panel today, and I want to start by having them introducing themselves.
All right, I'll just get started. Hey, my name is Johanna. I'm one of the co-founders of Traceless Materials. And at Traceless, we use residues of agricultural grain processing to produce a novel alternative material to conventional plastics and bioplastics. So our material is completely plastic-free, naturally biodegradable, and we're looking to substitute plastics and bioplastics in products that can either not be recycled or are not being recycled, or products that can easily end up in the environment, like, for example, single-use cutlery.
Hi, my name is Prateek Mahalwar. I'm a CEO and founder of BIOWEG. We're based out of Germany, and we are replacing microplastic. And we use waste streams from B2B industry, waste streams from agriculture and food, use fermentation to make different biopolymers, and in the end, use a little bit of a chemistry on the top without using any toxic chemicals to generate functional ingredients so that they can do the job what microplastics are doing in agriculture, in personal care, in cosmetics, and so on.
Hi, I'm Conny. I'm president of Forager by Ecovative. Ecovative was founded in 2007 already, and it is a leading company in microtechnology. And we have 2 business units. There's a food business unit where we make vegan bacon, and then there's Forager, which I represent, which is textiles and foams. And Ecovative's mission as a whole is to create material abundance through the use of infinitely renewable mycelium, which is a vegetative part of the mushroom. And how we do that, we grow our material in vertical farms on substrate, that's biological waste. So we inoculate that, we then close the farms, and we very carefully control all conditions. And then after 9 days, we open the farm, and then these beautiful mycelium mats come out, and then they get processed, depending on which strain we grow, etc., into either food or into foam or textiles.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Hoffman. I'm one of the partners of Forbion Bioeconomy. We're a newly launched venture capital fund, launched last year actually, investing in the bioeconomy. So as the name suggests, we're based in the Netherlands and invest at Series A, Series B stages of companies that are replacing existing products or ingredients with more sustainable ones across fields of food, agriculture, materials, as well as environmental technologies. As such, circularity and circular solutions are very much core of what we look at and like to invest in. And yeah, very happy to be part of this panel today.
So just a quick reminder before we jump into the question that you can ask your own questions through the QR code that's available on the screens. So Conny, I want to start with you because you've been around the industry for a while. How do you think we're doing in terms of adoptions of those solutions today?
We have 2 business units. We have food and we have textiles and foams, and they're at very different stages. So food, I would say, is very far along. We are in the United States in over 1,000 stores, doing extremely well. Textiles is earlier, and that has 2 reasons. A, the material still is, I would say, on the last mile, but not commercially mass adoptable. And then also, I do think brands still have some learning to do in terms of how to use and how to market the materials. It's a little bit an innovator's dilemma. So if you basically if you only lean on sustainability claims, it's a little difficult because then you're down talking the rest of your assortment, and consumers might ask that question. So I think it's really important for biomaterials to establish themselves as materials of their own right, with their own USPs, with their own really uniqueness, so that you have something, you're creating something better in whichever way, and that is really, really key, and that's what we are also working on.
And Alex, since you're investing in the space, and I mean, you're newly assembled as a fund, but you have been, I guess, scouting in the space for a while. Have you seen some major changes in the way those technologies are going to market and how it's received?
Yeah, I think the core change, or let's call it development, that we've observed is that most companies are, let's say, more realistic about the market conditions, in the sense that the green premium is not necessarily an acceptable proposition in the long run. So most companies are very aware of the fact that what they produce ultimately needs to be at the same price as existing products in the market, needs to have the same performance or better, to potentially justify a slightly higher price, and ideally needs to be drop-in. So anything that doesn't really change the existing process of industries further down the value chain. If these conditions are matched, and we believe that then those companies have bigger success chances. But we also see that most companies understand this more and more. So I think the times where we believe that we can sell and grow companies on the basis of a green premium, but that customers are willing to pay more, I think this is more realistic today.
Mm. And Prateek, Johanna, you're commercializing at the moment, so this is something that you're, I guess, experiencing in the everyday life. Do you feel the adoption and the customers being ready to move with those solutions?
So I think I talk about, in general, industry, right? So in general, personal care industry is already at some kind of a inflection point where there are already products in the market, and it's not about sustainability, but it's a category. So in beauty and personal care, there's already a category on green product, biodegradable product, and so on. So it's more a marketing category. But also there are initiatives from EU like green claims directives, which make sure that you really follow what you are claiming, and that is happening more and more. And you see a lot happening on the consumer side, that the consumer is really pulling the products which are green, clean makeup, and so on. So there is much more and more happening. The example is L'Oreal, especially Lancome, have used a rose water. And this rose water is fully made from the side streams. Yeah, there are similar examples from Estee Lauder and so on. So it's a very clear category creation there, especially in personal care and beauty. And this is happening more also on the side of agriculture, right? So one side is the customer pull, and then there is a push from the EU on the microplastic regulation. So you are seeing kind of the highway created also for us on which we are and trying to sell.
Yeah, I guess I can absolutely second that. I think all of us are a little bit annoyed with all the plastics that we're using, and we're providing a solution to the plastics problem. There is a lot of end consumer pull. And there is a certain push from the EU as well, especially when it comes to packaging single-use items. And we see lots of customers looking to scout new materials to find solutions for this. We talked about this as well. The market adaptation needs to be there, and I'm absolutely with you. Ultimately, yes, we need sustainable solutions, but they also need to be at least competitive in pricing. They need to be adaptable. They cannot demand too much of a change in the industry and the production process.
Yeah, indeed, it's one of the main challenges we've discussed while preparing this. The trade-off of consumers wanting more sustainability but not being willing to pay more for it, or to not have the same performance. So how would you say you're addressing those challenges, and do you think the current technologies that are being developed are better when addressing these triangle of price, performance, sustainability. Conny, you want to get started?
Yes, I mean, first maybe one point just to add to what you said, because I come from the beauty industry, and it's very interesting from the consumer perspective. If sustainability meets health, that's where people pay more money, because then, and we always said in the clothes, like when you ingest something, that's the best. When you then the face, the skin is the next. But everything that's further away, the willingness to pay more is sadly less. So I think at Ecovative, we are very clear. We need performance, scalability, and price, all three. Because otherwise, the consumers rule with their wallet. That's what they do, if you like it or not. And so you need all three. And how we address that in terms of performance, we are in our DNA a research company, so we are in the final push because we have a very unique product in the fact that we use the structure of biology, so it has a beautiful texture and beautiful feel because it feels grown, but we still have to address strength and uniformity. For scalability, that's built into the business model at Ecovative, which is a big advantage because we use existing vertical farms and tanneries. So, and we have to re-equip them, but we don't have to build a new factory every time we want to increase capacity. And we can also gradually deploy CapEx, which is a big advantage. And then costs, I think, is a double-sided sword because there is a reality of a price-volume curve. That just exists, you know, if we like it or not. And we are obviously at the very beginning. And then, but we know that the bioefficiency of mycelium and production cost can get us where we need to be. So it's really, and it takes time. So time is money, so it takes investors. So, and ultimately everybody in the game has to remain involved. So Fashion for Good brought a really good report out on next-gen material, and they said that innovators are the architects of possibility, and brands are the catalysts of demand, and the supply chains are basically the gatekeepers for adoption. So it really takes a village, it takes everyone to make this true.
Prateek, I know it's a topic you're working on.
No, so I simply is, when I'm just a material producer, I think my material is going to go in makeup or shampoo, and I get really excited when I go to supermarket and see some really green, a claim on a marketing that it's free of microplastic, and this is a super green product, and I get excited, I buy it, I use it, and I don't feel my hairs are not shiny or very rough, or I don't feel better, I'm not going to buy this again, right? So I think performance is a key criteria, right? So I personally think in future, in 10 years from now, majority of the products or the portfolio which different people are selling will be sustainable, but there will be a differentiation created on performance. And this is something which we really, at BIOWEG, we have paid a lot of attention. We said, hey, our job is not stopping just creating a material. So we have developed a very big formulation team, develops all kinds of foundation, lipstick, mascara, shampoos, agriculture coatings. We developed, we apply, and we compare them with the market products, similarly to how cosmetic companies do. And when we perform better, we take this data and say, hey, by the way, I'm not selling you this sustainable ingredient, I'm selling you a value. And you sell this value which will be transferred to the end customer. So performance, I think, is a very, very important criteria out of these three. And I think sustainability is going to be baseline in future. Performance will be there. And price is very, very important if you want this to be rolled out. If I want to change shampoo of everyone, that the shampoo should not have a fossil fuel-based acrylic polymers, I need to make sure that I provide similar pricing so that everywhere in the world can be implemented. Definitely might be not today you have the whole pricing, but should have a very clear idea that how this is going to go. Yeah. So I think performance and then pricing and the sustainability is going to be the baseline. So that's our goal, and that's what we have looked into.
So Alex, how do you advise the startups in your portfolio on that matter? Because, I mean, I guess they need to consider it from the very beginning.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Most of the times, hopefully, startups will have already figured this out when we invest. But no, jokes aside, I think the clear point of view is, of course, that all the points that were mentioned are true. We believe, also speaking to the large companies that are the current incumbents with the products in the market. So they will not look at something that doesn't perform. So I fully agree here. I think then price, again, I think what you said, Conny, makes also a ton of sense, that you need to look also at the entire supply chain. Because most of the times companies that we look at are, relatively early in the value chain and normally don't sell to the end brand, but have a few of different customers in the middle. So you have kind of different targets that you have to go after, both the end brands, and need them to convince to include your product in their final overall product, and that means influencing the entire supply chain to make sure that they actually purchase it from the ingredient companies. And this takes a lot of time, effort, because you need to convince multiple people, and especially if, let's say in your industry, if you look at converters, they might say, I have my existing supply chain in order, why should I change it for this customer? So you need a lot of conviction, and you can do this, of course, easier if you have performance and price working out.
And indeed, I think that's one of the other challenges that we discussed, actually, the supply chain and having to connect actually different supply chains, because your bio-waste might come from an industry and then your upcycled biomaterial might target another. So you might be connecting the agriculture world with the cosmetic world, for instance, and it's not necessarily a supply chain that exists today. It's not necessarily standards that are used to be leveraged today in terms of stability of the flow of raw materials, in terms of quality of the materials you're using. So Johanna, I know you've been working in developing those products using bio-waste. How did you work and raise to those challenges of connecting supply chains together?
Yeah, maybe to give a little bit of context, we're using residues of agricultural grain processing. So, for example, when beer is brewed or starch is produced, we take the leftovers of these industrialized processes. On the one hand, that makes it easier for us to source our raw materials at scale as well, because there is an existing market, and that market actually has tons of years of history, so it also gives us great predictability on the price of our raw materials, for example, helping to also calculate what at scale we can achieve in terms of pricing, for example. On the other hand, we also have, and I think this is very important, a very robust production process that allows us to produce our material at a very high constant quality. Independent from what supplier and what batch of material we get, because we are working with biomass, and that has differences depending on season, depending on how rainy or sunny the year was. So that is really important that the technology behind is also providing that robustness to make sure that we can always deliver the same quality in our material and our products to our customers.
Prateek, I know you've had projects that were also addressing this kind of challenges.
So we take waste streams and convert into media for fermentation. And I think it's, variation in the waste streams or coming from different sources really change the media, and your bacteria or your microorganisms really behave differently. So what we have done is we have developed a pre-treatment process, and that's one part of our IP. And basically this pre-treatment process changed all different types of waste stream into certain standard parameters. Then we will be soon, I think, tell you, one of our investors asked us, so you are using waste streams, it should be free. I said, no, the waste streams the side streams are not free. It costs you more. The value of the waste stream is low, but it costs you more to transport these waste streams from a site of origin to your factory or to your location. So in order to solve those smaller challenges in this value chain, we have said, hey, how we can make sure, if we want to do manufacturing in Europe, how we can be cost competitive, how we can scale this and make sure that we are able to reduce the cost and make it for the market. Looking at the value chain, we collaborated with one of our waste stream providers, one of a sugar industry or starch industry, and we are now co-localizing our fermentation plant. So we have a plug-in, plug-out of the waste stream. We are saving cost, and we have a surety of the feedstock and the consistency, and we are taking from a single provider. So that basically standardized a process on a big level.
I think maybe to add to this, it's an important comment to say, the expectation that waste streams should be, free or cost very little. Obviously, that's not true, and I think we should also always look at what else is this waste stream already being used for, because, I'd say for centuries, humans have been extremely good at making use of all the resources that we have. So typically, there is already a use case for some sort of the waste that we produce. And so it's always the question, is the use that you're applying of higher value potentially than what it's currently being used for? Even if you incinerate waste, that still has some effect in terms of heat recovery or something. So I think this also needs to be critically looked at when you assess, okay, what waste streams can I use? Is there sufficient supply? Is it consistent? And will cost potentially change if more people suddenly demand it?
And maybe if I can jump in there, also from a sustainability perspective, right? And at Traceless, we made sure from the very beginning to have a consequential life cycle analysis on our entire product and product life cycle to make sure that if we take these waste streams out of the market, what the effects of that are actually going to be.
Yeah, and I think honestly, already burning your waste streams costs money. So I don't know where this idea of free waste comes from, because we are not seeing it, but the cities are paying for our waste. Even if you're not valorizing it, just like getting rid of it is not something that's for free. So Conny, I want to go back to you because you're quite advanced at Ecovative. How did you approach the scale of those technologies? Because I think not many companies have yet reached it, and not, as you were saying, in all markets. So do you have some tips for the entrepreneurs in the room in how to approach it from maybe the beginning of their journey, and what were maybe critical milestones that you had to go through that we can learn from?
I think it's important to build scalability into the business model, to think about that very, very early and not be surprised by the lack thereof afterwards, because it obviously is not only, it's a capex driver and a cost driver. So that wasn't me, but the founders from Ecovative, they did that. They built their business around an existing vertical farming and an existing tannery infrastructure, so which again offers huge advantages, and also for the industry, because what we do when we go into vertical farms, we also revitalize it because we re-equip it. So basically growing mycelium takes precision control, really tight control of environmental conditions, because it's a very aggressive organism. It likes to grow. So you have to really control it, and that actually also revitalizes an ancient business, basically, that is not necessarily thriving in Europe, except in at least the old button mushrooms that my grandmother still used to put in every sauce there was. So it's also a big opportunity to take existing infrastructure and give it a higher value application to really thrive with.
Now, Alex, I want to ask you the reverse questions, because I think we're also learning from mistakes. So any mistakes you're kind of warning your portfolio companies to look out for?
Mistakes is a good question, because of course, mistakes happen sometimes along the way, and I think it's still we like to say it's a young industry. It's not necessarily so young. I think we've used biology or upcycled waste streams for quite some time already. So I guess it's more the question of, again, having a realistic view of where companies can go and what can be achieved. So I think one of the, a few of the points that we like to address are, do you need to build your own facility, or can you outsource to use existing capacity, for example? If that's doable, I think it helps you to get faster a little bit to the market and to a product. I think this may be a bit cliche from an investor's perspective, but valuations is a topic, because I also believe that companies need to be aware that we're not in a market where we've seen plenty of billion euro acquisitions. So I think that's also a sign that we need to start from somewhere, and need to maybe also be disciplined in the way to say, what are realistic exit scenarios, and who would potentially buy a company at what value? What would be the triggers to get it to an exit? And I think understanding this and therefore back calculating, okay, what is the potential valuation I can ask for or be valued at today, is an important factor to also succeed in the long run. And I think doesn't mean that only an exit is a success, but it would set a very important signal to the market to say, there is a pathway. Industry is actually looking for it, not just for partnerships, but to actually incorporate it into their own companies. And I mean, we've seen this in other industries. This usually triggers the ecosystem to thrive even more. You have successful exits, you have successful founders and management teams that typically go back to restart companies. And so I think if we have those signals more and more, this would be helpful for the entire space. But again, this comes back to the question of what can we expect and therefore what valuations make sense.
And Johanna, Prateek, what would you need in your journey towards scale? What would be helpful, in your opinion, in the upcoming years that you will be facing this question?
I think there's two things, mainly two things, there's many, but I think one, the collaboration along the entire supply chain and value chain is a very important one. You mentioned that earlier, and having people that are willing to go the way with us, because ultimately our materials, for example, are applicable in so many applications, in so many industries. We cannot be experts for all of these different end applications. So we need partners to actually work together with us in developing these materials and bringing them to market to all these different end applications. And the other thing is very plain and simple, money. I mean, the IP behind Traceless, really the innovation, is a novel process. So we are, fortunately or unfortunately, but not able to plug in existing production plans, which gives us an advantage when it comes to scale and the way that we can scale. But it also requires a lot of money to build production plants from brick, steel, and mortar. And financing such first-of-a-kind plants is just not something that many venture capitalists are willing or able to do based on their models, business models, and it's also not something that private equity or banking is very used to. So it really is a niche, a novel niche kind of thing. And what I see lately and what we see and what is amazing is there's many people wrapping their heads around how to build financial products to being able to finance first-of-a-kind plants. I'm not sure anybody has actually really cracked it yet, but it's good to see that there's a lot of effort being made.
Fully agree to what you said. And beside this, I think ecosystem is key, right? Why, if you look back to fossil fuels, why fossil fuels are so cheap, it's because of the ecosystem, fully developed ecosystem. So I think we need this ecosystem and different players in this ecosystem, from governments to NGOs to other companies, to be developed in a kind of in a parallel. Yeah, if you go on a fast track and the ecosystem is not developed, there are a lot of hurdles in the whole supply chain. So I think this ecosystem needs to develop in parallel, and that is something which at least I look to, that in next 5 years I see Europe having a very strong ecosystem on the bio-based and circularity.
Conny, you want to answer?
Yeah, just to add two things I think that we would also need is don't make perfection the enemy of progress. I do think this is something that can very easily happen as an excuse not to do anything. So you make the hurdles so high for something new, it's nice and convenient because then you basically find an excuse not to proceed. I think that's a danger. And then in terms of capital, I think it's an alignment of the time of capital, the time horizon of capital with what's needed here, with what you said. It's basically a long-term undertaking. I mean, it would be really good to see some strategics also join the space because they have longer capital horizons often. In Germany, the family offices, the family businesses, people who have tendency, a little bit more patience in their capital structure, because this is a long game. This is not a short win. And obviously, a lot of people like AI and SaaS models as this fast scalability model, and that's just not how this industry works. It's an old school industry in the sense of actually needing real infrastructure, real builds, real products are being shipped from A to B. That it's not an old school industry in the intellectual property, but in terms of how the processes are. It just needs time, and the ecosystem around it needs to give it that time.
So we just discussed how indeed the ecosystem needs to be brought up and how it can be challenging to finance this scale through first factories. So Alex, I want to turn to you. What advice, how should funders approach financing those first factories? So it can be, how do they go and pitch it to the VCs, or should they maybe consider blended finance? What's your perspective on that?
No, it's a very good question, one that we're also confronted with all the time. There's never an easy answer. I think the problem is that, of course, every investor sees capex, and first reaction is usually no, thank you, because you don't like to see your money spent on just some assets that might eventually not work, right? So I think one of the key questions we typically like to ask is, how much proof or how much evidence can you already generate that de-risks, let's say, the buildup of a larger size factory? Is it just a replication? Are there new processes or new steps involved that might risk the functioning of this larger scale plant? And then obviously it's all connected to commercial traction. Yeah. Like, you can build a big plant, but if you don't have the market waiting for the product that you're producing, then of course that doesn't mean much. So what you're trying, and of course many companies are exactly at that intersection where they're too early to generate, let's say, proper offtake agreements or actual sales, right? Because they don't have the ability to produce products at a certain scale or quantity. And customers are not ready to say, well, this is not a real proof, so I'm not signing an order with you guys if I can't secure a certain amount. So it's, of course, it's a tricky situation. So what we try to do is to focus really on understanding the technology and the technology risk of scaling up. And so we're not shying away from capex investments if needed. So it's something that we will finance as well, but of course selectively where we believe that's the only other way. If, and I said this before, if there's a path to use existing capacity, then it's of course always preferred. In the long run, if you have secured more sales and commercial traction, building your own plant will be needed, and I also fully agree here that the ecosystem, the entire infrastructure will also be needed to be built up, and more capital will be needed for that, by the way, quite a bit. But yeah, all to say, we will invest in capex intensive companies, but selectively, and where we feel that at least there's as much de-risking that could have happened before is also the case. And where we also see that the market need actually demands for a product that is then being developed.
Yeah, yesterday we were actually on that stage discussing scale, and indeed orders were one of the key things, like securing either public or private procurement as one of the key enablers for the scale. And I know we discussed how some regulations were actually helping with the convergence, but I know also that some industry standards are sometimes getting in the way of those public or private procurements. When we were working, for instance, in construction on mycelium to do insulation, and it was sometimes hard for new type of material, of bio-based material, to comply with older standards or labels. So is it something that you guys are facing, and how do you think regulation can play a role in smoothing up the access to market of those technologies?
I mean, especially in the plastic space, I said this earlier, the Single-Use Plastics Directive banning certain products being made or produced from plastics, the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive also incentivizing the use of sustainable alternatives is really helping us. But often novel materials are also not initially considered in these regulations, and that can be a hurdle on the other end. In this regard, for example, we joined forces with other startups building products and based on natural polymers like we do, to have a voice as well in Brussels, in the EU, to make sure that these novel materials are considered. So our natural polymers group is present in the discussions in the EU, and we can say it works. Like, they are really listening to us. Thank you. They're listening, and it is always difficult, I believe, to bring together the timelines on EU regulations, which we all know take their time, with the innovation timelines of novel solutions. But there's a huge willingness here as well, and that's great to see.
And Conny, I want to turn to you for the food part, because I know it's one that's been around for a bit longer, but it's also heavily regulated. So did you see any progress, any things that, as Johanna mentioned, like supported you, and what more should we be doing to enable?
I mean, I cannot speak particularly to food regulations, but to me, I'm actually not a friend of too much regulation personally, but I think regulation is great if it knows what it wants to do and if it stays as attainable as possible. And I think regulation overall can have three goals. It can support innovators in a time where they're very vulnerable because they're simply infant, So I think that's super key, is basically support scaling, support innovation, support R&D. The second thing I think is to put the cost for lack of sustainability where it belongs, because that is often carried by society as a whole, which is really unfair, So basically, the profit is allocated to unsustainable business practice, but the cost is allocated to society as a whole. So I think that's a second area, clear goal, cost allocation to the person causing it. So that there are things like a fossil fuel tax, etc. And the third, I think, is consumer empowerment. So, and that is labeling, that's basically like in food, you have to put on every food product how much sugar is in the food product. So if we had clear goals for sustainability for different categories, you could see a world where there is a percentage of virgin fossil fuel content on every product, on a label. So, because then you empower the consumer in a highly complex world to actually make the decision that he or she wants to be making. And I think two principles are key. Keep it as simple as possible and attainable, because complexity never favors innovation. I mean, at least not never that I've learned it. It's, you never have the resources, so complexity favors always the incumbent. And I think the second one, that's dreaming now in the current environment, but it's global, Again, an innovator always is limited in resources, so as global as it can be. That obviously not just attainability. So that's, again, right now, probably not the time, but that would be great too.
So I just want to add something on the food side when we touched the topic food. So I think there are a lot of recycle or circular novel materials also in food, and they are labeled as novel foods. And I think so we are really good in doing the science, especially in EU, and generating really variety of textures, taste, and even nutritious food with these novel foods. But I think we really have to work together, startups and EU and all the industry and a consortia, on this registration process. It takes more than 2 years. And most of the companies in the food space who are developing new materials or novel foods, they go to the US first, because the timeline to launch is faster. I fully understand. I think there is nothing wrong in terms of regulation, because our safety for the food is very important as a human being. But there should be a way to fasten this process. And I think that is something we should work together. So if there is somebody on the EU, I would love to discuss and see how we can push this.
Thank you, guys. So we have a couple of questions from the crowd, actually. So I'll ask you. How do you predict the flow quantity of bio-waste along the whole supply chain? So I guess the question is, because you never know how much waste you're going to get, how do you adapt to the unpredictability of this flow of supply chain?
I mean, as I said, we are sourcing from an existing market, right? And yeah, there is certain variances in it, but ultimately, there is pretty good predictability through the fact that the market is so old. So for us, this doesn't seem to be a challenge. But of course, we are also looking to extend our supply chains, making sure that we can reliably source and reliably then deliver to our customers.
Yeah, so we take from multiple sources. We work on side streams or waste streams which are available in huge quantities, also in different continents. And in worst case scenarios, what you said, Alex, that if the same waste stream is going to be used for something else, what we have done is we have developed different strains working on different waste streams. So those strains are in our strain bank. We are using one strain type today, but we can easily shift from one type of a waste stream to other which has a carbon. Yeah.
We use agricultural waste products, which is obviously quite widely available, and we adjust. So in the Netherlands, we use biostraw because that's what's widely available there. In the United States, where we grow food, we use soy hulls and sawdust. So we can adjust the substrate or the food, basically, for the material, depending on what's locally available around the farms.
Thank you, guys. Another question, how do you ensure the full circularity of your solutions?
I'll give it a start, you guys add. Traceless really is based on the principles of cradle to cradle, right? Where there's a difference between the technical cycle, the recycling we all know for glass, for paper, for plastics, and the biological cycle. And our products, our material really functions in the biological cycle. So if it ends up in the environment, if it would end up here, maybe it's not enough moisture here, but if it would end up in the environment, it completely composts there without leaving a trace, because the natural polymers our materials is made of is something that the microbes in the environment have known for thousands of years and can decompose, making them into organic nutrients again, from which new plants can grow. And so our materials are made for the biological cycle. However, they do also, and this is important, not interfere with the mechanical with the technical cycle in the waste streams that we are usually discarding our wastes, our products in.
Yeah, I mean, so in our industry, or especially in personal care and cosmetic industry and agriculture, it's really controlled. Yeah, so the biodegradability criteria of full biodegradability within 60 days. So there is a directive from OECD 301 from OECD, and you have to show the entry point to the client or any discussions. The first thing is the certificate, right? Are you fully biodegradable in natural conditions, in soil, in seawater, and also in sludge? And the same thing, right? So when you are a biopolymer or natural, doing the good job, it's easy for microbes to break it fully into the carbon, nitrogen, the elements. Yeah? So you have to show that test, and that makes sure that whatever we produce, the variety of different versions which are doing functional part on your skin or in the makeup are fully biodegradable and is not joining the microplastic cycle.
For us, I mean, I want to differentiate between the making of the raw material and then the finished product, right? So those are two different stages. So the mycelium itself grows on the substrate goes back into composting or into microcomposite products. The mycelium itself at that stage, obviously fully biodegradable. Then though, now it becomes a finished product. So in food, obviously it kind of biodegrades through your body. So, and then in textiles, it depends on the application. So it goes through a tanning product, so it behaves like leather. So for some applications, when it's linked to performance, there's going to be finishing chemistry in this. This doesn't make it home compostable. So there, the priority for us is on performance. So because longevity, obviously, to me, is obviously absolutely critical in terms of the product, and then it's really a brand choice of how they want to finish it that then influences the end of life of your handbag or shoes, etc.
Thank you, guys. So I think with our panel, we've established that now, I mean, those solutions are not only ready to make the world more sustainable, but really to scale and change really the impact of this industry that's not for free, as it's been discussed. But what we need now is a call to action, right, to the ecosystem to invest more, to trust those products that are ready to not only be sustainable, but be performant and be competitive when it comes to price. So if you can collaborate with one of those solutions, if you can invest in one of those, we really invite you to connect with the speakers later. Thank you.